Scarecrow was always terrifying, but this new version just crossed a line. Let's talk about Jonathan Crane. In Batman's world, a world full of clowns with acid and assassins who can break spines, Scarecrow has always stood apart. Because he doesn't hit you. He doesn't shoot you. He makes you destroy yourself. His entire weapon is you. Your darkest memories. Your deepest shame. The thing you can't stop dreaming about at 3 a.m. Scarecrow just opens the door and lets it all flood in. That's why Cillian Murphy's version in Batman begins hits so hard. That burlap mask. That quiet, clinical detachment. The way he sprayed fear toxin like it was nothing. Like your terror was just data to him. Murphy made Scarecrow feel like a man who had genuinely stopped seeing other people as human. It was chilling. It was iconic. And for years, it set the gold standard for what this character could be on screen and on the page. But DC just changed the game. And I need you to understand, what they've done in Absolute Batman number 19 is not just darker than Murphy's version. It is something else entirely. Absolute Batman is DC's prestige reimagining line, taking classic characters and rebuilding them from the foundation up. No safety nets, no continuity restrictions, just pure, unfiltered creative vision. And in issue number 19, Scarecrow gets his moment. This isn't a tweak. This isn't a costume redesign or a slight personality shift. This is a complete reconstruction of what Jonathan Crane is. The creative team has stripped away everything comfortable about the character, everything that let readers keep him at arm's length, and replaced it with something genuinely unsettling, something that feels less like a supervillain and more like a force of nature. But you need to see the scene that proves it, because once I describe what happens in this issue, you'll understand exactly why the internet has been losing its mind. Picture a farm, wide open land, quiet, the kind of rural stillness that feels peaceful right up until the moment it doesn't. And standing in the middle of it is him. This new Scarecrow doesn't look like a man in a costume. He looks like something that crawled out of a nightmare and forgot to go back. His face is stitched together, skin pulled tight and sewn shut in ways that don't quite follow human anatomy. And where his eyes should be, button eyes, dark, unblinking, perfectly, horribly still. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't monologue. He simply appears among the farmers working the land. And something in the air immediately shifts. The farmers feel it before they understand it. That crawling sensation, the weight behind the eyes, the sudden, irrational certainty that something is very wrong. And this is where it gets disturbing, because Scarecrow doesn't reach for a canister. He doesn't spray anything. He doesn't pull a weapon. He just looks at them, and the fear starts. Not the cartoon kind, not the action movie kind where someone screams and runs. The real kind. The paralyzing, suffocating kind that locks you in place and shows you things that aren't there, things pulled directly from the parts of your mind you've spent your whole life trying to wall off. The farmers begin to unravel, right in front of him, and Scarecrow watches, patiently, almost tenderly, like he's admiring his work. The outcome is brutal, and deliberately left slightly ambiguous, because what's implied is far worse than anything shown outright. That's a horror storytelling technique, and DC is using it masterfully here. But then things get worse. Because that scene? That's just the opening act that here's what separates this Scarecrow from every version that came before. It's not the fear toxin. The toxin was always almost understandable. Scientific. There was a chemical explanation. A rational framework that let you process it. This version of Scarecrow seems to operate beyond chemistry. The fear he induces appears to be direct, unmediated, mind to mind, like he's reaching directly into your psychology and pulling. That removes the safety net. With the old Scarecrow, Batman could make an antidote. He could hold his breath, filter the air, find a scientific solution to a scientific problem. What's the antidote for this? What's the countermove when the weapon isn't a toxin, but a presence? When just being near him starts to unravel you. This version of Scarecrow might be the first iteration of the character who is genuinely, mechanically unstoppable in a way the original never quite was. And that's not even the twist that broke the internet. There's a phone message in this issue. I'm going to keep the specifics vague, because if you're going to read it, you deserve to experience it cold. But what I will tell you is this. The message implies a level of coordination, of planning, of reach that extends far beyond one farm, one location, one isolated act of psychological horror. And then there are the crows, a swarm of them, appearing precisely when and where the story needs them to, behaving in ways that crows simply do not behave, causing a crash. And the question that the issue leaves hanging, the question it very deliberately refuses to answer, is whether those crows were controlled. Whether Jonathan Crane has somehow extended his influence beyond human minds. Whether the birds themselves are afraid of something, or whether they serve him. That single unanswered question reframes everything that came before in the issue. You go back through those farm scenes and look at the crows in the background, and suddenly they feel less like set dressing and more like witnesses. It's genuinely brilliant, deeply disturbing horror writing. And it changes what Scarecrow is in this universe. Every previous version of Scarecrow had a ceiling, a point where Batman could outthink him, outmaneuver him, shut him down. Because every previous version was ultimately a man. A brilliant, broken, dangerous man, but a man. This version doesn't feel bounded by that. The supernatural undertone, whether it's literal or deeply metaphorical, removes the ceiling. It makes Scarecrow less of a villain to be defeated and more of a condition to be survived. That's a fundamentally different kind of threat. And it makes Batman's job, already the hardest job in comics, feel genuinely, newly impossible. When your enemy isn't just smart and ruthless, but potentially cosmic in his reach. That's a different story. That's a darker story. And for Batman, darkness is the whole point. Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow was a cold intellectual. A man who weaponized fear like a surgeon uses a scalpel, precisely, clinically, without emotion. Absolute Batman Scarecrow is something older than that. Something that doesn't need precision because it doesn't need a delivery mechanism at all. Murphy's version made you think about fear as a tool. This version makes you think about fear as a god. One is a brilliant man playing with chemicals. The other might be something fear chose to wear as a face. If DC leans into this version, if this Scarecrow gets built out, expanded, given more issues and more story, it reshapes the entire absolute Batman universe. Because a villain with potentially supernatural psychological power doesn't stay contained to one storyline. He bleeds into everything. Every character who crosses his path. Every hero who has to face him. Every corner of Gotham that his crows have visited. This could be the most dangerous iteration of a Batman villain DC has ever put on the page. Not because he's the strongest, because he's the most inescapable. And that, ultimately, is what makes Scarecrow who he is. Not power, not force. Inevitability.dc has been building something with absolute Batman. Something ambitious and dark, and genuinely willing to go places the main continuity won't. And with this version of Scarecrow, they might have just created their scariest villain yet. Not the most powerful, not the most theatrical, the most real. Because the thing this Scarecrow represents, the idea that fear isn't something done to you, but something that finds you, is a horror that doesn't need a comic book to feel true. You already know that feeling. We all do. So I'll leave you with the only question that matters right now. Is this the scariest version of Scarecrow ever put to page? Or is there a version of this character, somewhere in DC's long history, that still haunts you more? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you chills, the like button is right there. Subscribe if you want to go deeper into the darkest corners of DC with me. And I'll see you in the dark.